Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is under fresh scrutiny after CBC News learned a staffer in her office contacted Crown prosecutors about cases related to the blockade last year in Coutts. According to the work of our colleagues in Alberta, emails critiqued the prosecutor's assessment of charges and pushed back on characterizations of the protest. The provincial NDP is calling for an independent investigation.
Premier Smith must appear in public today, identify who in her office has sent these emails, and confirm that that person has been dismissed. But we've also not received a response from Tyler Shandro, and so I'm restating our call for him to launch an independent investigation today. Failing to do so and allowing this chaos to stand will cause profound damage to the rule of law in Alberta.
A statement from the Premier's office says Premier Smith has not been in contact with Crown prosecutors and has no knowledge of anyone on her staff having done so. This is a serious allegation. If a staff member has been in touch with a Crown prosecutor, appropriate action will be taken. It comes after Premier Smith said in 2 instances she had contacted prosecutors and then clarified that she'd only spoken with the Attorney General. So what to make of all of this? The Power Panel is here to dig in. Emily Nicolas, columnist with Le Devoir. Marie Vestel is with Le Devoir. Paul Wells is a journalist and author. AP Tasker is with CBC News. CBC Calgary's Jason Markusoff. Jason, I want to start with you. Can you describe the blowback today and what is going on right now in Alberta to this story?
This is quite serious, and you get the sense from the statement that Premier Smith's office put out last night that they realize the gravity of this. They realize the gravity of the accusation. It's well known. Even Danielle Smith, when she had that little kerfuffle last week when she talked about, oh, I speak to prosecutors regularly about this stuff. Oh, wait, no, I don't. I shouldn't, and that's wrong, of course, so I wouldn't be. She acknowledged the gravity, so they understand that this is quite serious. What has been discovered by CBC regarding these emails, and so they are saying that somebody will be dealt with if this is occurred. We do not know at this point what kind of investigation they're launching, what the consequences would be. But in talking to some people who've run the Alberta Premier's office before, it should be pretty easy to find these emails. There are records retentions rules, even if they've deleted it or double deleted it. That's a problem, and there will be record of that. Or if they, did something improper, say having it on their personal account, well, that would be an issue too, but we don't at this point know. We haven't heard anything from Premier Danielle Smith or her office today, but certainly people are suggesting that somebody who did this might well be fired.
The level of, politics in Alberta can be pretty intense to begin with. Emily, I'm just curious, how would you describe what we're learning about the situation in terms of the severity of it?
I mean, it's very serious. There is so many things in what was just shared. It's not only obviously somebody from the government we're trying to see if it's the premier herself or someone on staff contacting the prosecutor, but it's also how difficult it's been to get any sense of what the truth is. From this premier in the last week. It's been a non-ending cycle of this is what I said, this is not actually what I said, this is what I'm saying now, and this makes it very difficult as well for even the public to have a sense of what's actually going on. And so yes, there are multiple ramifications to that, and it plays into a general sense that when it comes to essentially the checks and balance in Canada of, what's the role of Ottawa, what's the role of the province, what's the role of a premier, what's the role of the Legislative Assembly, because that was also a debate during the sovereignty, the adoption of the Sovereignty Act. And now what's the role of the premier versus what's the role of the judiciary. So just essentially all the aspects of what are the divisions between the different level of powers in Canada seems to be an issue with this premier.
Paul, do you expect people to lose jobs over this?
I can think of one who might. She's the premier. She's in a tighter version of the fix that finished off Jason Kenney. She won the race to succeed him by making solid promises to people for whom Jason Kenney was not nearly conservative enough and not nearly anti-establishment enough. She said that people who had refused to be vaccinated were more badly discriminated against than anyone in Canadian history. She said they were being railroaded in false trials and that she would fix it. She has also said the opposite of all of that, which means she's in present danger of losing the support of the people who expect her to call prosecutors. And she's being seen as less and less serious as a steward of government by the small number of Albertans who were willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. So one understands why she's reluctant to comment as much as she was commenting a few months ago or a few weeks ago, because commenting that much was not helping her, because she's got a balancing act that I'm not sure can be sustained.
Marie, we know the opposition is calling for an independent investigation. Is what else should we expect going forward? What are you anticipating as this kind of unfolds?
Well, I would hope that the investigation, Jason alluded to it, the investigation that the Premier's office is saying maybe they didn't call it an investigation, but the fact they're saying they will look into it. I would hope that investigation, at least its conclusions, are made public, because sometimes parties say they will look into it and then you never hear about it, other than maybe a little statement saying someone lost their job. So I would hope that they are transparent about what happened, the level of this staffer who allegedly sent these emails, what was in these emails, and that they don't just push it under the rug to avoid talking about it, like Paul says, because it's not really making them look very good right now. I don't think the timing of this could be any worse. It's 4 months from an election, but it's also on the heels, like you said, of other things that the Premier has said about talking to prosecutors about charges being laid against individuals who participated in the Coutts blockade, and a series of other unfortunate things that the Premier has said since she has become Premiers. And so even if she says that she didn't know about this, or her office didn't know about this, even if they repudiate it or they condemn it, it still gives the image publicly that there's an accumulation of these types of things. And it also gives the image perhaps that the Premier's office would license such a gesture by someone in their office to prosecutors, because the Premier herself had said that she talked to prosecutors all the time. So the whole pattern of it and the image of it is really not helpful to the Premier so close to an election, and after it's been going so poorly for her since she got there. It's hard to see how they really recover from this, because we're going to keep talking about it while there is this quote unquote investigation.
JP, from your perspective, describe the gravity of all of this.
Well, I keep thinking about the actual cases that are pending in court, right? There are 4 that are making their way through the court in Lethbridge, and the actions of this staffer likely just disrupted the provision of justice. Because if you're a competent defense attorney, you're going to fight tooth and nail now to get these cases thrown out, because this is not right. You can't have a political staffer calling up prosecutors and trying to get some information, trying to bully them perhaps into trying to drop charges. It just seems awful. I mean, this has to be a rookie staffer, I presume, because this is governing 101. You don't use your heft as a political staffer in the Premier's office to try and twist arms down at the Alberta Prosecution Service. I think that's outrageous. And now I wonder, what happens? These are serious charges that are pending. The Coutts blockade was violent. There were serious firearm charges laid on certain folks, and now we might not ever see these come to fruition. We might not actually see justice prevail in this case. And I think really, the thing that strikes me as well is that these were not allegedly just basic questions that the senior staffer was asking of the prosecution. They were really pushing back. They weren't just asking, is this in the public interest? Is there a reasonable chance of conviction? Some of the things that the Premier was allegedly asking her Attorney General about with respect to COVID-19 cases. This is seemingly a whole step in a different direction. And that staffer and potentially the Premier could be up a certain creek without a paddle.
and we don't necessarily know. There hasn't been reporting on necessarily on whether that you said possibly a junior staffer. We don't know. We don't know that. I don't necessarily know that.
I just can't imagine a senior staffer would be that dumb, but maybe they could be. I mean, it's entirely possible. I'm just saying, I don't understand how someone who is a seasoned vet who works in these circles, who understands the division of powers in this country, would actually make that move. But I guess an investigation will give us more details.
Jason, given the timing of this, how significant is this for Premier Danielle Smith, and what is this going to do for her chances to try and stay in power?
This is really tricky for her. This is, I think this is where ethical lapses come in, ethical controversies come in. She said a lot of things where she had to walk back this and that. This is more than just something somebody said. This is, this is allegedly judicial interference, prosecutorial interference. And even Danielle Smith herself has acknowledged how wrong that would be from the political side of things. And here is somebody in her office sending an email challenging and prodding, as JP rightly said, the handling of a case involving weapons charges, mischief, conspiracy to commit murder is one of the charges in Coots as well. So this is very grave. The NDP are not going to let this go away. Danielle Smith herself is actually about to head off on international vacation soon, but this situation, it's not going away.
And I don't think that this will go away while she's on vacation, as everyone learns more about this. And when she comes back, there will be plenty of questions.
We have an IT department that can look at all of the emails that have been received by Crown prosecutors and assess it against all of my staff and see if this email that the CBC is making reference to even exists.
Welcome back. That's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's reaction on her Chorus radio show to a story CBC News broke. Sources told CBC News that the Premier's office contacted Crown prosecution about cases stemming from the Coots border blockades and protests. Smith's office has denied the story. This comes just days after the Premier backtracked from comments that she made when she said she had contacted prosecution. Smith has now ordered an independent public service to review the alleged emails alongside the IT department. That's following an emergency caucus meeting yesterday. Let's bring back the Sunday Scrum to make some sense of all of this. CBC News senior parliamentary reporter David Cochrane in Ottawa, the Toronto Star's Queen's Park bureau chief Rob Benzie, he's in Toronto, and the Globe and Mail's Alberta columnist Kelly Kreiderman is in Calgary. And that's where we will start with you, Kelly. So, I mean, the recognition that something should be looked into is not obviously an admission that it happened, but I guess there is a realization that it is potentially explosive politically for the Premier if some of this is borne out to be the case. Kelly.
Yes, I think what we saw yesterday from the Premier, this announcement that the public service would look at emails from her office, about 34 staff members in her office, was the first acknowledgement of the story. But really, this is a story that's been simmering for a long time. The Premier has been talking since December about speaking to prosecutors, and that's why there's some energy to the story. It is based in part on comments she has made. She has talked about talking to prosecutors and saying there really isn't a public appetite for COVID-19 prosecutions anymore. Since she first made those statements, her office has backtracked from them and said she used imprecise language. But you also have a Premier who got elected on the basis of fighting health restrictions, talking about the unvaccinated being the most discriminated group against ever. And all of that to a lot of questions when we hear this CBC report talking about a member of her staff contacting someone in the Alberta's Crown Prosecution Service. It really is a big question because of the Premier's past statements on this. And she herself, as a pundit in the past, talking about the SNC-Lavalin scandal one day after the Globe and Mail broke that story, she said it had to be investigated. And, this weekend I spent some time reading Anne McClellan's report following that SNC-Lavalin affair, because that's what you do on the weekend. But she talked about how the integrity and the impartiality of prosecutions is not only what happened, It's the public perception
That's
of
right.
what happened.
That's
and
right.
that's why it's so important for this to be cleared up.
And I think the problem here, Kelly rightly says, Rob, is that the Premier has made suggestions in the past about putting pressure on prosecutors, whether that was a directive to staff or misinterpreted by staff or didn't even happen, raises questions for people about political interference at very least.
No, exactly, Rosie. And given the Premier's past statements, it's not outrageous to think that an overzealous staffer might have sent emails to Crown Prosecution Services. That's the problem for Ms. Smith, of course, is she's got an election to fight very soon, and this CBC News revelation really hit her hard at a time when she was actually doing a little bit better. The federal government's just transition push is not going over very well in some parts of Alberta, and I think she was certainly seeing some wind at her back because of that. It would seem to be forcing NDP leader Rachel Notley a bit on the defensive. Mm-hmm. She sort of joined Smith's chorus for the Prime Minister to maybe not move forward on that. It's like going over like the National Energy Program in Alberta, and then something like this happens, which is sort of like shoots her own push in the foot. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, she just can't get it. If it wasn't for bad luck, I'm not sure Danielle Smith would have any luck at all.
David, how are you viewing this?
Yeah, Rosie, if I know anything about the United Conservative Party, it's that I don't understand anything about the United Conservative Party. I mean, she's been premier for 3 months, and she squeezed a year's worth of clarifications and backtracks into that. But you have this situation where something that is still unclear to me about this story, you have the Coote situation. Was this staffer allegedly trying to get the minor blockade charges dropped or trying to get the more egregious violence charges dropped, or all of it? Because both are unacceptable, but one is particularly egregious. But if you look at the sort of political climate and go back to when this was happening last fall, Danielle Smith was promising pardons for people who defied COVID restrictions.
Amnesty.
Yeah, she was, amnesty, which is not really something you can actually do, right?
No.
And she said that she's spoken to prosecutors, as Kelly has outlined, and you sort of create this climate, because at the time, the Sovereignty Act was still being seen as this powerful defiance of federal regulations and laws as a way of sort of thumbing your nose at norms and rules. And so is it a surprise that someone in her office is accused now of having reached out to prosecutors in violation of all of these norms to try to get them to overlook laws when it comes to an unlawful protest that disrupted major border crossings? And I know at the end of the clip you played from a radio show at the beginning, she said, if this email exists. Now, I'm not part of the original reporting. I've not seen this email. I've not read this email. I don't know the specifics on it. But Rosie, you and I know the bar you have to clear internally here to be able to report a story like this. It is very high. So this is not a flimsy report or a flimsy allegation that has been made. Our colleagues in Alberta have done some serious work on this. And you now have her facing quite a serious allegation, which, if proven true, would inevitably, or should be, a firing offense for the person in that office, because you just simply cannot bring political pressure to prosecutors in our system if the system is going to have any merit whatsoever.
So she'll launch this investigation. She'll see if this indeed, happened, and perhaps a person will be fired. But what does it do to her, Kelly? Even if the Premier didn't order this to happen, even if she knew nothing about it, how damaging is it for her, as you say, heading into an election?
Yeah, I think there still is a lot clear, and the CBC story specifically stated they haven't seen the email either. So I think there is a lot of questions to be answered. I think we're only at the beginning of getting questions answered, and I think that's a problem for Danielle Smith because we don't know how long this will drag out. She's talking about an internal investigation being wrapped up early next week. I doubt it's going to be as simple as that. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are asking for more answers than a public service investigation of the Premier's office. There's people asking about private emails and other ways that someone could have reached out to the Crown Prosecution Service. Who exactly was reached out to? Was it an administrator? Was it an actual lawyer? We don't know any of those things. So I think how this plays out matters. Now, having said that, we are we are not far from a May election, but in political terms, we're a million years away from a May election. In terms of what can happen before then, what issues are focused on. As Rob pointed out, Danielle Smith was having a good week last week up until this point, talking about the just transition, talking about getting flu and pain medications to Alberta for Alberta kids, talking about a lot of good things until that derailed this week. It is possible that she gets back on track from this. We have seen that in the past in politics as well.
Rob?
Oh, I mean, Kelly makes a very good point. It's 4 months away, the election, but that's many, many lifetimes. And, you know, in Harold Wilson's famous, you know, week is a lifetime in politics. So I think I think the problem is that it's what David was saying earlier. It's a pattern of behavior, of snafus, of clarifications and gaffes and apologies. And it starts they start to pile up. So it starts to look like amateur hour. And that's the problem that she's going to have, because Rachel Notley is a proven commodity as the NDP leader in Alberta. She was the premier of Alberta. She's still popular. It's very, very rare in this country for a former premier to come back and be reelected. Robert Bourassa in Quebec was the last person to do that, you know, more than 30 years ago. So I think I'm watching that election very closely. It's going to be a great story this year. But Danielle Smith has some serious competition from Rachel Notley.
Yeah, 30 seconds to you, David.
Look, the big challenge for Danielle Smith is that when you're a struggling premier in a government that shows signs of disarray, the people around you start leaking like a straw diaper. And so this story got out, other stories will get out, and it will create challenges for her leading up to May. Because clearly, if you're offending people like Crown prosecutors with your intrusions into their professional conduct, these are serious people who take these things seriously, and they're not going to take it lying down. We're seeing an example of this on manifest display right now.
I mostly invite David for the expressions that I'm not familiar with, which emerge when he speaks. So we got another one of those today.
Excellent.
David, thank you for coming in. Rob and Kelly, appreciate it as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Sunday. Okay, talk soon. Bye-bye. In Alberta, an internal review has found no record of emails between Premier Danielle Smith's office and Crown prosecutors. It came after CBC News reported that a staffer had been in contact with prosecutors over cases related to the Coutts border blockade. Premier Danielle Smith released this statement. I am confident in the integrity and professionalism of my staff. That's why I'm grateful for the nonpartisan review completed this weekend by the Public Service Commission, which found no records of contact between the Premier's office and Crown prosecutors. I have full faith that the Public Service conducted a thorough and comprehensive review. I would like to thank them for the seriousness with which they took this matter, as well as their commitment to working nonstop over the past number of days to provide Albertans with results to put their concerns to rest. The opposition, Alberta's NDP, want an independent investigation.
What the Premier has done is an IT review. She essentially asked, the IT folks within the government to do basically a Control-F search between, the names of staff in her office and staff of some relevant prosecutors. I mean, really, the Premier should want to put an end to this as quickly as possible as well, if there's nothing to hide. She should be calling this investigation to clear the air as quickly as possible. The fact that she refuses to do so lends more suspicion, suggests that there is something that they're hiding.
I should also note that our colleagues in Alberta have issued an update to the story, and they are standing by their journalism in this story. The Power Panel is here to discuss. Sharon Carr is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Brad Levine was the Principal Secretary to former NDP leader Jack Layton and is now with Council Public Affairs. Jamie Ellerton is the founding partner of Canaptis. And Rob Russo is CBC's former Parliamentary Bureau Chief, my former boss. And joining us for this specific discussion is CBC's Calgary's Jason Markusoff. Jason, I'm going to start with you. So bring us up to speed on where things stand with this story now that this statement came out from the Premier's office.
Well, certainly reporting from CBC Calgary's reporters who broke this. Our team and others outlets are continuing to look at this, continue to have questions. What we don't know at this point is what the parameters of that search were. The Alberta government, Alberta Justice, says that they had searched for emailed, sent, and deleted emails from several dozen Premier staff and hundreds of Alberta prosecutors. What's not clear is the extent to which they've looked through personal accounts sent and received. As we know, there are notorious stories in various situations of individuals wanting to conceal some emails by using personal emails, so we don't know the extent to which the search is there. So there's still some questions. Look, if they're if you are inclined to believe what Premier Smith says inherently and have distrust of the media, those people are having a very fun day at this point. For those who are trust what the CBC is reporting and the integrity of its journalism, and have been skeptical of some of the things that Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith has done and has said, you need to have questions, and I think things stand there at this point.
Here's part of the update from, I've got the article from our colleagues in Alberta. It says, sources told CBC News the staffer sent the emails last fall that critiqued prosecutors' assessment of charges laid and pushed back on characterizations of the protests. CBC News has not seen the emails. It goes on to say in an email, Chuck Thompson, head of public affairs for CBC, said the organization stands behind the journalism in this story. And Thompson also added that information about sources is always confidential there. Jamie, with this statement coming out from the Alberta Premier's office, is this kind of where does this end here, or will this continue to be a problem, a drip, 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 more stuff comes out problem, possibly?
Yeah, Katie, I don't think this is where the story ends. There's just too many holes in terms of the qualifications in the Premier's statement. I don't know if you can put a Freedom Convoy through the holes in that story, but you can definitely probably fit a Ford F-150. And so I think this is going to be something that's going to dog the Premier's office for greater transparency as to what's gone on. And I think you're probably going to also hear greater calls for the CBC to reveal sources and to put more information on the table, because as right now it's an anonymous allegation. Obviously, the CBC has confirmed it in some form or another, given the journalistic practices of having multiple sources confirming key details like this in stories. So I don't think this is going to go away. If the Premier's office thought this was a one-day issues management story and they had IT staff, as the clip in just before this said, control F-ing to see what was coming up in a search, I don't think this is going to satisfy a public that wants answers.
Brad, what should the NDP do to push on this story?
Well, I think calling for an independent investigation is the right tact, because I don't think that those, unless you are a supporter of Danielle Smith, you're probably not going to trust an internal investigation that she then reports out the findings, when she herself was and her team were the suspects who are under investigation. So there's no credibility to her internal. An independent one might shine some lights on it. But I think that the whole ordeal speaks to how chaotic and messy this Premier's office is. She went out on 2 times, very clear in her language at the time. I have spoken, or I have communicated with, and then she says, as new cases come up in the prosecutor's office, I always tell them, look at it if it's in the public interest, and look at it for the likelihood of prosecution. Well, those are 2 elements that the prosecutor's office already follows. They don't need the Premier to advise them on that. But the fact that she says, I was imprecise in my language, suggests either that she doesn't know what she's doing, or she got caught out in something that later she understood to be a misdeed. This story is not over. It will keep dripping out. I think Jamie and Jason are right in terms of will there be more? The only thing that all that I think has been kind of settled here is that those emails that Danielle Smith's people looked at, or the civil service looked at, didn't turn anything up. That doesn't mean that there's other emails, the private emails, text message, anything that 2 people would communicate with that would avoid the freedom of information or an investigation like this. There's still quite a bit of suspect, I think, that in the eyes of a lot of Albertans.
Sharon, what do you think the Alberta government, what the Premier's office should be doing at this point? Can they take a deep breath and relax at this point, or do you think they need to sort of push ahead and keep looking at this themselves?
They definitely will not be able to take a break on this. I think this story has many legs to it. Anyone who's worked in government is well aware of how these IT searches occur. There's different things that can happen. There's parliamentary emails that are often not covered in these bases. There's ministerial and Premier's office emails, there's personal emails, and a Control F search is not going to do it for you. There's a whole bunch of different things, and I think folks who've been inside the system understand how nuanced it is. So I think that what they need to do is either come clean if something did occur, or at least try to do a fulsome investigation. This is not going to go away. We've already heard the Premier say that she too has contacted prosecutors before. So where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So I think we're going to have to wait and see.
Rob, you have covered a political scandal. Where do you expect this to go?
Well, I think this is one of the rare times when your introduction to me as a former parliamentary bureau chief is actually germane. People need to keep that in mind,
Yes.
given what I'm about to say. Let's remember where the story started. The story started when the Premier said, in reference to talking to Crown prosecutors, she said, I ask them on a regular basis as new cases come out, is it in the public interest to pursue, and is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? Now, she said that just 10 days ago or so. This is the Premier who said herself that she's done it. Does that not prompt journalistic inquiry? Yes, it does. She said that, as Brad said, her language was imprecise, but that's why people are looking, number one, because she has raised this issue. So having had to go over these kinds of issues where we do use anonymous sources and stories, we do so quite reluctantly, and we do it quite rigorously. Knowing some of the journalists involved in this, the peerless Kathleen Petty, among others, who's looking after this, and the journalists who've reported this, I can tell you that they're not sort of fly-by-night knife artists. They're serious, rigorous journalists, and I would be stunned if there wasn't more journalism being committed right now on this story, and more journalism that isn't going to come out on the story as well.
Yeah, that is something that a lot of people hear, because there's been so much criticism. We saw it sort of really gain steam with Donald Trump in 2016, attacking the media and sort of going after stories that rely on information through sources who are not identified publicly. And there can be a number of reasons for that. It can be the person is not authorized to speak and could lose their job. There could be safety issues. I'm not talking specifically about this, but when this kind of journalism is being done, it's done with a reason. And usually what happens is that reason is explained, at least in our reporting, as to why it was done. Either the person could risk job loss, or there could be some other reason. Some stories we do, there's a safety concern there. Jason, I'm going to give the last word on this to you. What are you expecting? Where do you think things are going to go from here? Is there any predicting politics in Alberta right now?
There is no predicting, and my excellent colleagues, Megan Grant and Elise Von Schiele, would have been here sitting explaining this story to you, except they're busy working and finding out more on this and other issues.
All right. I want to thank the Power Panel for this first round, and Jason Markusoff specifically, because he's joining us just for this little slice of the Power Panel.